show up on time, don't be a jerk, play well. You do those three things, you will exponentially increase your odds of finding more work and better opportunities.
What is it about the energy of Nashville? How has the technology surrounding us changed the way we musicians do what we do? And how does a person go from being down to their last pot of coffee to touring the world with the biggest names in their scene? Welcome to Contrabass Conversations, your show covering life on the low end of the spectrum. I'm your host, Jason Heath, and I am thrilled to bring you this episode today with Todd Parks. And Todd is one of the most active bass players in the Nashville scene. He's played with people like Sam Bush, Jerry Douglas, James Taylor, Alison Krauss, Garth Brooks. The list goes on. And Todd's doing great things out there in the music world. It was so much fun to chat with him. He's got great stories. This was a total blast for me, and I know you're going to love it. And we've got some great sponsors for this episode. Upton Bass. Todd plays an Upton Bass, by the way, and the Bass Violin Shop. And we'll be featuring excerpts from LJP. It's a song that Todd wrote for his nephew from an unreleased album with Frank Vignola on guitar and Matt Flinner on mandolin. And we'll also feature a tune by Jerry Douglas, Glide, from the album Unfolding. This is the version that Todd Parks played, but there are also versions with Daniel Kimbrough, who's a past podcast guest, and Edgar Meyer. So links to everything we talk about are in the show notes, and a big shout out to Eric at Upton Bass for connecting Todd and me. And we start off our conversation talking about the creative energy of Nashville. It's such an amazing state to me because, I played for 7 or 8 years in Memphis. And you want to talk about a study in contrast. Oh, okay. Man, like Eastern, like that versus like the, Mississippi Delta world of Memphis.
Oh, yeah. Tennessee's, it really is 3 entirely different states all wrapped into one. And they even have it depicted on our state flag with the stars and the whole, it signifies the 3 different regions because it's completely different. Completely different. Like my body actually feels different as soon as I cross over the Cumberland Gap where it's officially East Tennessee. It's like, I could breathe in like a sigh of relief. I was like, I'm back to home.
Well, it's funny, even like Memphis to Nashville, like, man, I can't believe how different those 2 cities are. Like I've only been to Nashville maybe 3 or 4 times, but, lots of time spent in Memphis. And like, it's just remarkable to me. It's everything about those places.
Yeah, it's a completely polarized different world. In Nashville, at this point in the ballgame, the last 4 years has grown so much. I mean, there could be times where I can not maybe go downtown for maybe a week or 2. And I go down there and I don't recognize some of the stuff. It's growing so much is being built. So many people, it's like 100 people a day are moving here right now.
That's amazing. It's like Nashville and Austin seem to be like, it's like they can't lay down road fast enough for these places.
No, there's not enough road for all the people here. But what it's creating is a really interesting music scene right now here, because you're getting a massive cross-pollination from all the people that have come from the different places and with their different interests, and there's something for everybody here. You just have to take the time to go out and find it. That's what I really, really enjoy about this time.
Yeah, I'll bet. Well, because like people who haven't spent a lot of time in that part of the country, probably, country music's probably what they come to mind first, right? And obviously that's like a big component, but there's so much there. And I remember like walking down one of the streets, like isn't BMI based there and all those publishing? Isn't there like a street with all those places on it?
Yeah, Music Row has all it's the leftovers of the old studio system, and then all the publishing houses are there. There's a lot of things in the old studios have gone into people's basements at this point in the ballgame. So I have a ton of friends that have like completely functional studios, like their whole basement of their house is a studio, just as good as anything you could find down on Music Row. So that's where I end up doing a lot of my work is in my buddy's basement.
When did that transition? Because you've been in Nashville for a while now, right? Like 12, 15 years, something like that, or?
Yeah, I actually moved here in August of 2003, so 14 years now.
Okay.
So I'd say it was gradually, then all of a sudden. That's the best way to put it, because as technology improved, where people could really do things like we're doing right now, where we're on the other side of the country, and you're going to make this blog and this podcast, and people all over the world could see it. As technology improved, people would figure out ways to do it themselves. They would figure out, without the financing of a record label, without the A&R guys deciding what they were going to record, when they were going to record it. Basically, it cut it as people started cutting out the gatekeepers and saying, "Man, I can do this myself." The home studio thing burgeoned into something well beyond what anybody could have possibly imagined. And I'd say really, the last 10 years have really, really made the change. And you tie that in with the influence of the internet and the good and the bad of, everybody can spout their opinion, whether you like it or not. That's neither here nor there. But it creates more opportunities for people to get heard.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is amazing in itself. I mean, just really, like, even just your own podcast right now amazes me, because it brings together so many different people that may or may not have found out about each other, and it causes a cross-pollination that wouldn't have occurred without all this kind of technology. I mean, you got to think, you're a cat on the West Coast, you're talking to a guy in Nashville, Tennessee, we've never met before, but through your work, which I appreciate, and thank you for the whole bass community right off the bat, I've got to learn and hear about all kinds of different folks and all kinds of different approaches that I wouldn't have necessarily thought of. And I've gotten to take those things that speak to me and be like, okay, how can I incorporate that into my daily routine? How can I get better using these things? And then as a result of that, it's like, wow, I would have never thought of that. This is great. Keeps me from having to reinvent a wheel.
Right. Well, it's great. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. It's one of those things that, it's a really fun way, at least like what we're doing here, to use this technology, like, for good, I guess.
Right.
And I sort of forget on my end, right? Because like you said, like, I'm sitting here on the West Coast, and we're chatting. It feels like we're on the phone, and I sort of forget that it goes out into the world like it does, and it just sort of amazes me sometimes. Like, what are some other ways that just the tech world we live in has, like, affected what you do professionally?
Oh man, for me, it's like you kind of get a little bit more aware of every note that you're playing. It's like a forced mindfulness, because you could be on some little normal, society gig or something like that, and you're over there in the corner playing "Have You Met Miss Jones?" and somebody could sit there and somebody could put you up on Facebook Live at that exact moment. At that exact moment, you have no idea what kind of reach that person has. So for me, it's really forced me, and I say forced because it's not a bad kind of force, but it really makes you think, man, I've got to really bring the heat, whether I'm playing for 10 people or 10,000 people. And I've always felt that way. It really puts me in a situation where I'm thinking I've got to be on my A game and do everything I can to make this music happen. And again, that's always been my mind state, but at any given second, the whole world could see what you're doing, good or bad. So that's one way it affects me. When it comes to the reach of the people I'm working with, it's the way I think the technology deals really affected us is it's kind of taken things in a way almost back to vaudeville, where the live gig is the thing. You're wanting to do everything in your power to get people to show up to the gig. And that's great, because I like playing for people. I mean, I really love playing for folks, man. I want to see those people react. I want to see them feel something. I want to feel that energy from the crowd to come back. And, that's kind of cool in itself. In the last couple of years, actually through your podcast and a common friend, I became aware of Lauren Pierce.
Oh, yeah.
Amazing,
mm-hmm.
Absolutely amazing, like mind-blowingly amazing. So I was like, you know what, I want to do a little bit of refresher on some of my bow stuff. I bought Lauren's course, and I've been working through it, and it's been amazing. Oh, it's been great, man, because it creates opportunities for me to see things that I wouldn't have seen before, think about some things I hadn't thought about in a while, And it's from a person I've never met.
That online course thing that's a powerful model. I can't wait to see that continue to evolve.
Yeah, it gives you the opportunity to study with somebody. They like in Lauren's case, she's so clear and she's so precise about what she's trying to achieve in each one of these little lessons. And man, I appreciate that so much because I sit there and go, oh wow, I've never thought about that in my own playing, or oh, I've let my bow trajectory slide a little bit, as we've all done here and there, I'm sure.
Yeah.
and it you have this opportunity to create mindfulness about things that you might have had together at one point or another, but for whatever reason, you start thinking about doing the laundry or whatever the case be, and next thing you know, you've slid, and you're like, oh yeah, here's this thing again. Oh, cool. Oh, I've never thought about it from that perspective before. Oh, or wow, if I move my bow a quarter of an inch closer or further away, it's going to do this. Or sometimes just the way somebody says something, it might reach you in a better way.
I remember when I was in high school, I think, or early college or something, reading this Steve Rodby, the jazz bass player. Steve Rodby used to write a column for Bass Player. Maybe he still does, but he did for years and years. And it was all about what you're talking about, just sort of like on the gig, like just sort of letting a few things slip, little things. And I think he was even mentioning bow techniques. I think he had some ideal day he'd drawn up. He's like, here's how someone out there is probably practicing like this. And it was like 5 a.m.
I remember the exact art. The 5 a.m. guy, he got up, started with long tones, and, capped it off with a little Hindemith, all that.
Yeah. Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah. I'll have to try to track that down and look. Yeah. Okay. So we've read the same one. What do you do to keep, because you're on the road, quite a bit. Like, what do you do to keep the chops up? Like when you're out, you get a lot of time with the bass and then when you have that time, like what sort of stuff do you do to keep yourself, in shape?
Oh man, I do the best I can to try to stay on the same things I'm doing. I have a very specific regimen of the fundamentals that I work on all the time. I kind of view those things as like stretches, calisthenics, or whatever the case be, right before I get into the meat of the workout. I've got a whole bevy of I'll just, ironically enough, I will start with the long tones, just like Steve said. I do not get to the Hindemith, but I do the long tones. I studied with a guy named Rusty Holloway that was the bass professor over at the University of Tennessee, as did my buddy Daniel Kimbrough. And he had distilled down some things from the Samandel book, like he called them the essence exercises. And I found over the years a lot of people have come up with different variations of those essence exercises, whether they call them that, whether they've taken them from the Samandel book, or they've reinvented the wheel and come up with them on their own, or Lord knows how folks have decided these are the exercises that seem to really take in the essence of what you're trying to do, and when you're focusing on the technique end of the deal. In our case, we called it the page 69 exercise. I don't know if you're familiar with that or some kind of, depending on what edition of the book you use, it might be on page 71, 68, but we called it page 69. That's just where it was in the international edition.
Mm-hmm.
So, and what that would have, you just play with straight bows, and then you'd have bow 2, slur 2, or slur 2, bow 2, slur 2, et al. Matter of fact, in Lauren's course, she has a variation of it that I guess she got from Craig Butterfield, that essentially you're doing the same thing with like a C major scale and you go up to the ninth. It's the same kind of deal.
Next up, we dig into Todd's whole journey. It's a great story, and it's what I said in the beginning. He's literally down to the last pot of coffee, and then he gets this call from Jerry Douglas. How did that go? It's a lot of fun. And I'd like to thank Upton Bass. Todd plays an Upton Bass. That's a great endorsement right there. And I'm a fan. I like what they do. Gary, Eric, and the other folks at Upton, they're doing great things for the bass world. They're constantly finding new ways to better serve this world that we're all in. If you're a classical player, if you're a jazz player, if you're a student, if you're a professional, Gary Carr plays an Upton bass. Many of my former students have played Upton basses. A lot of podcast guests play Upton basses. They do great videos too. Have you ever checked out their YouTube channel? Be sure to check that out if you haven't. And you can find a link to that and everything they're doing at their website, uptonbase.com. All right, back to our conversation with Todd and his whole journey through this wacky world of ours.
Can you just take us like from maybe getting back from that USO tour to starting to really be a working professional person in the newgrass scene?
Okay, yeah, I'd be glad to do that. Now, the way it worked for me is I came back from the USO tour, and I used the money I made from that tour to finance my move over here. Personally, I think it's a good idea to have a large chunk of change set aside when you move to a new place, so it'll give you the time to go out and check everything out. Because if you want to work with people, you got to be on the scene to be in the scene. That's kind of my paraphrase of the Thelonious Monk quote. I don't know if you've ever seen that little page of Thelonious Monk quotes that's floating around the internet. But if you want to play music with those people, you got to go see them. You got to go get to know them. You got to get to know the people that are in those scenes. So what I did when I came here is I went out constantly with an insatiable desire to play music with as many different people as I possibly could and create as many opportunities as I could. Because in this business, I feel very strongly you create your own luck. It's one thing. You know, we all have our goals of what we're playing and striving to do. You handle your business in the practice room. But if you're not taking the time to network and actually meet people and press the flesh, they're not going to know you. They're not going to think of you. And it's not necessarily the fastest gun in the West. It's the guy that shows up on time, is not a jerk, and plays well in that order. That's kind of like my three rule system. Show up on time, don't be a jerk, play well. You do those three things, you will exponentially increase your odds of finding more work and better opportunities. Like, hands down, without any question, if those three things will get folks real far, a lot further than you would possibly imagine. So, as I was running around and checking out the different scenes, I'd say, okay, well, I hear that this music's going on here. I'm going to go down here. I'm going to check out this jam session. I'm going to go to this jam session in a completely different genre. I'm going to go check out the singer-songwriters. And I tried to find people that I would sit there and I'd listen to them and be like, man, they're a really amazing musician. Great singer, great songwriter, great bass player, whatever the case be. And then I'd try to meet them. And I'd say, do I like this person? Is this somebody I think I could get along with? Because that's the biggest deal, is your relationships with the people. You know, if you have a good relationship with the folks, a true, genuine one where you actually have concern about how's their mom and them, as we say here in the South, that is going to reflect in. They're going to want to play with you because you're actually concerned about their world and what's going on with it. Having that kind of connection with somebody affords you the opportunity to make better music, I feel. And this is a very relationship-oriented town. So as I started building relationships with people in different genres. At that point in the ball game, my buddy Derek Jones was still here in town, and Derek was one of the two people I really wanted to get to know well. So I spent a lot of time with Derek, and I studied some with him and just hung out with him as a buddy and watched him at gigs, and he was kind enough to help me introduce me to some folks. He let me sit in on any gig he was on, and that opened up more doors for me. And because they'd be like, oh, man, we really like what you do, and I would be one of Derek's primary subs when he couldn't do things, because at the time he was playing with Jerry Douglas. So as time went on, I'm playing things from the Nashville Jazz Orchestra down to some little bluegrass gig in the middle of podunk nowhere or something. I'm playing everything I could possibly get my fingers into. So it was people that were either peripheral or closer to Jerry Douglas. And when Derek left to go play the Cirque du Soleil show, when Jerry put a new band together, my name had come up a few times, but he wasn't necessarily familiar with me. So Derek actually sent him an email saying, yeah, man, you should call Todd. And the next day, Jerry called me, and I'm sitting there I was incredibly broke at that particular moment. You know, I'm sitting there going I'm going to fight through. I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to have the persistence to do what I've always set out to do. And there I was on my last pot of coffee. You know, I had a gig in 2 days, but, otherwise it's going to be I'll be drinking a lot of water the next couple of days. Make this work. And lo and behold, the phone rings, and I hear, is this Todd? I said, yes. He says, Todd, this is Jerry Douglas. And I did one of those deals where I like backed away from the phone and looked at it like, really? Who's pulling a prank on me? So lo and behold, he called me and he says, hey man, I've heard great things about you. I'd like you to come over sometime, do an audition. I'll send you some stuff. And so he sent me a board tape and his last 3 records at that point in the ball game. So I immediately went out to task and transcribed absolutely every bit of it. Every single note that was on those records, whether it was Derek playing it or if it was Victor Krauss or if it was Edgar playing it or whoever, knew every bit of it as well as if I'd written it myself. I rolled up to my audition that day and I had everything in a binder, by record, in order, the whole 9 yards. And Jerry, I set it down on the table and Jerry said, well, what do you want to play? I said, I'll tell you what. Set it down. I said, you pick it. And he was like, really? He's like, no, really, pick a song. So I having a little bit of inside information, the 3 hardest songs in the book, in my opinion and some of the other folks at the time, was a tune called Push Too Far, which has a bunch of crazy, crazy odd time things that are just nuts. Something out of the brain of Jerry Douglas. It's a whole different place, amazing place. So we have that, and another tune called We Hide and Seek. That song actually goes differently depending on who's playing it. So I called those 2 songs first, and I played them real well. He says, "Wow, great, you got the gig," and there you go. You're laying your own groundwork. It's the other phrase I said, gradually then suddenly.
Yeah.
I think I believe that was actually how Steinbeck described somebody going bankrupt.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it works on the good side of things too.
I like that turn of phrase, gradually then suddenly. That's really good.
Well, it's like you look outside, you see a gorgeous tree, giant tree, or out there where you're at, the redwoods. Oh my God, they're amazing. They're gorgeous. They're huge. They didn't start off huge. They start off as little seed, and they stood there and did their thing, and next thing you know, they're several hundred feet tall. Everybody's like, oh wow, that's amazing. It's always been that way. No, it hasn't. No, it started off as a sapling, and it did whatever trees have to do to grow. And you think about trees growing. You see like a rock face, and you see a tree that's found one little snippet of soil, and it's found a way to grow. It's growing there. Like if you see pictures of like Angkor Wat or something like that, and you see these crazy trees growing out of rocks. That's kind of the same way I look at it as being a musician. You've got to find a way to root your seed and sow it and grow it, whatever that takes for you. Preferably do it with as much honesty and integrity as you possibly can, because that'll get you a whole lot further for a whole lot longer than the weird stuff that some people might choose to do. But you just got to go after it, man. It's kind of like the best way I can sum up making it in a new town, whether it's Nashville, New York, Chicago, Atlanta, LA, San Francisco, wherever, is you pretty much got to land on the shore and burn the boat and invade or die. You just have to have the mind state of, I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do everything I need to do to make this happen. And if you have that mind state, your odds go up a whole lot. It's not guaranteed, because nothing in life is guaranteed, but they go up tremendously if you're just after it all the time. Very persistent, lots of grit, determination, all those words. Whatever word you want to pick and use for your mantra of, I'm going to make this happen. That's what you got to do.
We finish up today talking about what it's like playing for truly massive crowds, which is an experience that I've never really had. Todd certainly has. We also dig into gear and what makes the acoustic music scene so special. Before we finish up with this last part, I'd like to thank our last sponsor, which is the Bass Violin Shop, located in North Carolina. They are the place to go for bassists in the Southeast. And they offer professional setups, repairs, and restorations at reasonable prices. They go beyond their customers' expectations with setups that are meticulous, they're friendly, they're helpful, they have highly skilled luthiers, and they've all got one common goal in mind, and that is making their customers happy with whatever bass they happen to play. So if you have an open seam, or you need a top-off restoration. Those are the two extremes, right? They can take care of you. They're there to help you through the process. Check them out online at bassviolinshop.com. All right, here we go with our final part of this conversation with Todd.
I don't think I've ever played something for more than I think 4,000 people is maybe my absolute max. Was it weird the first time you got on stage and just had that sort of sea of people?
That's an interesting question because you get up there and you kind of stand around and you look around and be like, wow, that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
But what happens is, I'd mentioned the 10 or 10,000 thing a little earlier, is pretty quickly you get back to, I have to focus on what I'm doing, where I'm at, who I'm with right now. And this is the people on this stage, and I'm trying to create music with these folks. I'm trying to be right here, right now. Now, if there's 10 people listening, great. If there's 10,000, if there's 50,000, great. Because honestly, when the crowds get that big, the people after, I don't know, maybe 50, 60 yards out, they just turn into little dots and you almost don't recognize them as people. You know they're people. So that part doesn't bother me on the massive crowd. Because really, in the same time where I was talking a little while ago with the technology thing, where you could be in the corner playing Have You Met Miss Jones at, Debbie Johnson's wedding, Debbie Johnson might have, 100,000 followers. So you could play for just as many folks playing Have You Met Miss Jones on the society gig as you are playing for 100,000 people in person.
What's your split between electric and acoustic playing typically? Are you 75% acoustic, 25% electric, or does it kind of vary? How does that work for you?
Oh, man, it really depends on gig to gig and who I'm with and what kind of mood they're on that particular day. With Sam, for the last, maybe the last year or two, we've been leaning a little bit heavier toward electric. Kind of go along with the record we put out last year called Storyman, which was the first time in Sam's career that he put out a bunch of songs that he wrote or co-wrote. Everything on there. And I actually only ended up playing one song on that record on the upright. But on the other hand, back in the day when I was playing with Jerry, it was pretty much, I'd say 95% upright playing. Let's see, on Monday I'll play with the Nashville Jazz Orchestra. That'll just be a straight upright gig, and some of my other little normal gigs will just be straight upright. It just depends, man. Depends on who's made the call and what kind of mood they're in when they write the set list.
Can you just walk me through? People love hearing what's used, for different gigs. Can you just maybe give me the rundown of maybe what you play when you're playing upright, in terms of bass, signal chain? I know you use a Fishman, and amp and that kind of thing, and then maybe take me through what you typically do on the electric.
Sure. Amp-wise, I'm a big fan of the Aguilar stuff. I use their Tonehammer 500 head, and I use two of their SL112 cabinets. That's my rig. If it's just like a small little society gig or something, it'll come. I may not use an amp at all, or most likely I'll just take one of the SLs. For my being a doubler, this is always a tough thing when you have to double on the same, and you have to make that quick change. I've always been hunting around for the ultimate A-B box. It's like the Philosopher's Stone, the sword in the stone. It's like, dear God, where is this thing we all need, and who's going to make the perfect one? And there's a lot of people who made really great options. The one I've been using for the last couple of years now is called the Rmi Base switch. Mm-hmm. And it's made over in, I think it's actually made in Luxembourg. But the gentleman that owns the company, I believe he is got a deal with, I've never been able to say this company name right, Leela, or some people say Leela. I was told that it sounds like tequila, okay. Leela. Right. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. But that thing is great. I use that, I run the upright through the first channel, which has a symmetric EQ on it. And then the electric bass goes through the second channel, which just goes straight through. The DI on the thing is amazingly clean, and I have no complaints about this item whatsoever. It is tough as nails. It does a great job. I actually did something really fun with that particular item at the Rocky Grass Festival we played over the weekend. Sam actually does these massive jams at the end of festivals, huge jams. You could probably find a couple of clips of it. here and there. It's like where you have like a who's who of bluegrass sitting on one stage.
Mm-hmm.
Like I hope the stage, and sometimes I look around and think, man, I hope the stage is strong enough to hold all these people.
Nice.
And so we're sitting there, and I had unfortunately the backline cabinet at this particular festival had some problems, so I couldn't feather the A string on my flying instrument, which is one of Charlie Chadwick's. I could not feather it enough to make that to get through the blown speaker the thing had. That's the reality of sometimes.
Yeah.
You show up, there's a piece of gear on your back line that's busted. You got to make the gig happen anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up playing electric on that gig, even though I was supposed to play like probably 90% of the gig on the upright. But what I did, though, is I said, at the end of the jam, there were some other bass players that came up, and I was like, okay, I have an idea. I sat there, I unplugged myself, I plugged two guys in, and I sat there with the A-B switch, and I just shuffled every time the tune would cycle through. I'd be like, okay, we're going to cycle through, boys. Here we go. Your turn.
Nice.
It was fun. I was like the master of bass. It was great. Let's see. Now I've got the Fishman Full Circle on here. I also have the Upton Revolution, courtesy of the Upton guys. Both those pickups are fantastic. They are fantastic. The Fishman, to me, is like the jack of all trades. You can trust it. It's going to do what you need it to do. It's going to be loud. It's going to be soft. It's going to be very accurate. The Upton has a wonderful sound to it. It's very, very woody. A great pickup, and it really, I have the two things on there because A, I want to back up just in case something goes wrong, and B, sometimes a different pickup will do better in a different room in a different circumstance. And I wish I could tell you what the different rooms and the different circumstances is. Just sometimes that's just how it is. It's like, oh, this pickup's it. Between the weather and the instrument and the room, how many people are in the room, sometimes one sounds better than the other.
There was a great photo of you on your website. I think it's you and Daniel and Edgar playing, or your son, right? Yeah, that was fun to see. Where was that? Do you remember?
Yes, that was at the Telluride Bluegrass Festival, I think, maybe 2 years ago, where that one went down. Yeah. It's fun because I've actually got the first time Daniel played at the Telluride Bluegrass Festival was in 2009. He was with a group called the Level Sisters. And we've got a picture from that year with the three of us, and then you have the more modern picture where all three of us have lost about 15 or 20 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
We like that one better.
Yeah, right, I'm sure.
I mean, we might be a little older and a little grayer, but we're a little thinner, and we'll take it. What I really love about this particular chunk of the bluegrass, because there's a couple of different subcategories within the bluegrass world. You've got, like, the people that are really hardcore into, like, original, like, 1946 kind of straight bluegrass. In the same capacity where you have somebody that's like, I don't play anything, past 1959 as a jazz musician. It's the same kind of bag. And what you'll find is there's a lot of cats that have a lot of different interests, and you'd be really shocked when you find out who some of these folks are, because you'll see them up there. They could be like in the hippie jam grass kind of bag, and next thing you know, you catch them over in the corner and they're playing giant steps. And this is the same cross-pollination stuff that I was talking about that you have had a massive hand in, whether you realize it or not, or it strikes you on a regular basis. You have guys that have like all kinds of interests. It's kind of like I kind of look at everybody's musical interests at this point in the ballgame as if you just hit shuffle on somebody's iTunes, and all these things sink in, and you can hear that influence in everybody's music. Say, for example, with Sam and Jerry, they have huge interest in music, huge things. And they pull in from all that stuff. And then the people that were influenced by them, they pull in the stuff from Sam and Jerry. Then they start learning about what Sam and Jerry really loved, like their root stuff and the things that they got interested in later. And then they find that stuff and they pull it in and they take their spin on that information, and it comes out in an entirely different way. So it's like this huge cross-pollination that just is really exciting. It's one of the things that drew me in to the acoustic music scene when I came to Nashville. It felt like it was the scene that was most receptive to anything. Because you got to think, at this point in the ball game, you have the younger bass players like Paul and Ethan that they've come out of the Edgar thing heavily. But at the same time, I know for a fact that Ethan loves Ray Brown, loves him some Ray Brown. I mean, who doesn't love Ray Brown if you're a bass player?
Right.
Something wrong with you.
Right.
But,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's my opinion on the matter. But so he can cop that bag too in the same regard, where they can get up there and play some kind of crazy fiddle tune with a bow that most of us look at and go, I can't do that. That's amazing. I'd like to figure out how to incorporate some of that, but I don't know if I could ever do that. But they can pull from all these different things and insert those the idiosyncrasies from a different genre into the bluegrass stuff, and it creates a whole new thing. It's really cool, man. It's really cool because really, when you think about it, bluegrass and jazz, they're a lot more closely related than a lot of folks give them credit for. Because you think in the essence of it, you play the melody, you solo over the form, you play the melody, and you stop. That is the essence of both of those musics. When you cut it down and be like, wow, how does the actual structure of these things work? You know, whether you're playing Whiskey Before Breakfast or Stella by Starlight, that's kind of how the bag's going to go. Now, somebody might tack on a new intro, they might put on a different ending, or they might play it stock, but you have that same deal. And once you make that realization that it's the same 12 notes, and it's just a question of what you're going to do with those notes, it opens up a whole new world to you. And that's kind of like, that's what I get out of going to these bluegrass festivals, especially the Telluride. They bring in a lot of different people. They've brought in a ton of different people over the years. I've had the opportunity to see David Byrne play there. Bela Fleck and Chick Corea did a duo gig there a couple of years back. You know, they become really good friends, and that cross-pollination's been nuts. Just watching Bela soak in all the Chick Corea stuff, which he's always loved since he was a kid, but now having the opportunity to actually play the music with Chick, it's unbelievable. Well, there was a couple of years back that there was this was kind of a mind blower where Edgar, I believe it was Edgar and Zakir Hussain and Bela were doing a trio. I mean, that music was so heavy, I could not believe it. But lo and behold, and the Sam band actually had to follow up after that.
Okay.
How do you follow that?
Right.
How do you follow that?
I don't know.
If you're the Sam Bush band, you play the theme song from Blazing Saddles.
Oh,
that's what we did.
Oh, that's awesome.
And people went nuts. And then lo and behold, a little bit later, next thing you know, I look over and they brought Zakir Hussain on stage. And I'm going, I'm standing by Zakir Hussain playing bass. Wow. I can't make this up.
Todd, so great to chat with you. Folks, check out toddparksbass.com. That's his website. And be sure to go to the photos section and check out that photo of Todd with Edgar Meyer and Daniel Kimbrough. I'm having a great time talking with folks active in the acoustic music scene, with Derek Jones, who was with Jerry Douglas for a long time, and with Daniel Kimbrough, and with Lucia Torino. And if you want to dig into any sort of topic, and we cover a lot of topics, right, on this show, almost 400 episodes, we've covered a lot. You can go to contrabassconversations.com, and there is at the top a link for Dig Deeper. And that will take you through this sea of content in all sorts of different ways. You can also use the app, which I find really useful for navigating content. I have to use it myself to remember what the heck I talked about with person X, Y, or Z. But if you download the app, contrabassconversations.com/app, it's for iOS, Android, Kindle. You can just search for any word. I write out what we talk about in the show notes. So if you think, I want to know about right arm, type in right arm and you'll see all these episodes and you can listen and that kind of thing. And follow us if you haven't. Instagram, we're active. Twitter, we're active. Facebook, we're active. And email us, feedback@contrabassconversations.com. Any way you want to reach out, I would love to hear from you. I love hearing from people that listen to this show. All right, we're going to wrap up there. That's it for this week, and we will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.